In factories of the Industrial Revolution, working conditions were dangerous and harsh. In Chinese factories today, it isn't much better.
During the Industrial Revolution, mass production and factories were at bloom. However, the working conditions were terrible for many of the factory workers. Child labor was common for kids between the ages of 4 to 15. These children worked jobs meant for adults, such as spinning and coal mining.
In factories, accidents were common in which workers lost a hand or a foot which got stuck in a machine. Workers worked 14 hours with only a few breaks. In some cases, temperatures were high and the only thing people could hear was the loud noises of the machines and the voice of the supervisors shouting in their ears. Punishments were harsh and were consequences for coming late to work or misusing the machinery. At times, people were beaten to death by the overlookers. Overlookers were the men in charge of looking after the workers. Jonathan Down told Michael Sadler and his committee in 1832.
When I was 7 years old, I went to work at Mr. Marshall's factory at Shrewsbury. If a child was drowsy, the overlooker touches him on the shoulder and says, "Come here." In a corner of the room, there's an iron cistern filled with water. He takes the boys by the legs and dips them in the cistern and sends him back to work. Here is a short video about factory workers during the Industrial Revolution.
Joseph Hebergram was interviewed by Michael Sadler's parliamentary committee on the 1st June 1832.
What were your hours of labor?
From 5 in the morning to 8 at night.
You had 14 and a half hours of actual labor at 7 years of age.
Yes,
Did you become very drowsy and sleepy towards the end of the day?
yes, that began about 3 o'clock and then grew worse and worse, and it became very bad toward 6 and 7.
Were you sometimes late?
Yes, and if I were 5 minutes too late, the overlooker would take a strap and beat us till we were black and blue.
As you can see, life was not easy for child laborers and factory workers during the Industrial Revolution.
Working conditions today have yet to improve. At China's Foxconn factory, due to 9 suicides in the year 2013, nets have been placed outside the building in order to stop the attempts. Despite the nets, 18 people have attempted to commit suicide, and many consider to. The factory workers claim that it's the overwhelming pressure to finish the set amount of work each day. However, during the Industrial Revolution, people did not attempt to commit suicide. Instead, injuries were caused due to the misuse of machinery. Today, machinery is much safer compared to in the past. Nowadays, workers often work 20 hours to finish their work. Yet, during the times of textiles and machinery, the workers worked 14 hours without an unbearable amount of work to finish. Chinese workers eat their food as fast as possible in order to sleep for the rest of their lunch because they're exhausted. Yet, what remains the same is the concept of low wages and exposure to harsh chemicals for workers. In Foxconn, the Chinese workers come from small and far villages with hope to get a job that'll help support their family. Many are poor and uneducated. Coming from a small and far village would mean that these factory workers would have to share dormitories with 6 others. In the Industrial Revolution, workers did not live in the factory. Instead, they lived in the nearby cottages. To end with, overall, the working conditions are terrifying for the people in the present, much like during the Industrial Revolution.